Hey guys, so in this video what we're going to be doing is creating an Active Directory lab. What we're going to be doing is creating a domain controller and going to be having two NICs on this domain controller, and one of them is going to be an external NIC that's going to get DHCP from my router here. The other one's going to be an internal NIC, which is going to feed all the devices that get attached to the domain controller on the internal organizational side. So I'm going to go ahead and start here and just explain as we go along. The first thing that we're going to do is go ahead and open up our hypervisor. In my case, I'm using the Oracle VM VirtualBox here. So I'm going to go to New. I'm going to name this Test Windows 80 Server 1. And I'm going to find the ISO. So I'm going to go select this ISO here. And once you do, it shows you here that this is already filled out. It's aware that it's a Windows server and the versioning here. I'm going to go ahead and click next. Now, virtual machine usually always kind of sets up this default user. So in case you ever need it, this is what it is right here. Just remember that, or remember to look it up either way. This button is grayed out actually because I skipped a step. So I'm going to go back and skip this unattended installation, hit next. Now, what you attribute to this virtual machine kind of depends on the operating system requirements as well as your hardware resources. In my case, I want this to kind of move along a little quickly here, and I have the ability to do this, so I'm just going to bump this up to 4 CPUs, and I'm going to give this 16 gigs of RAM. We're going to go next, and we're going to leave this drive to be how it is here. Just leave it as default. Next, finish. And then in settings here, we're going to go to settings first before we start the machine because we've got a couple things to do. We're going to go to advanced under general and turn on bidirectional clipboard and drag and drop. That way we can put things on it from the host machine, so my personal computer. And vice versa without issue. And then we're going to come over here to network, and we're going to set up that internal network, and we're going to name it internal. So here we have NIC 1, which is going to be the DHCP, and NIC 2, which is going to be the internal network. We're going to hit OK, and then we're going to start. So here in this setup, we're going to go ahead and leave this to English US. Next, install. We're going to run through this initial setup wizard here. So in this operating system setup menu, we're going to select this desktop experience because this one, as it states here, only gives you CLI access. We want the GUI, so we're going to select the desktop experience and hit next. Blindly accept the terms and service. No one has time to read all of this. Just sign your soul away and move on. Here we're going to go to custom, see that there's no drives taking up the space. That's exactly how it should be because this is a brand new machine. Hit next, and this is going to take a little bit of time to install. Okay, all that loading is done now, and we're going to come up to this screen. So we need a default administrator account to get into the Windows server. So in this administrator section here, we're just going to create a password. It can't be too simple, unfortunately. Like right here, if I just type out password 123, password 123, and hit enter, hey, this is not complex enough. Okay, so I'm going to make this a somewhat complex password, but something that I can remember pretty easily here. I'd recommend that you go ahead and write this password down, because if you're anything like me, you will forget the password. In a more corporate environment, you would use something like a password manager, but I'm not going to do that because this is my house, and I'm just going to go ahead and write it down on a sticky note. If someone comes into my house, I have more things to worry about than them getting a password for a test virtual machine. So right here, I'm going to go ahead and log in. Great, and now we're up and running. So here you see server manager starting to load, and we are going to notice something, which is that there's all this border. This does not look good, right? So what we're going to do to make this actually look good and functional is we're going to come over here to devices and insert the guest edition CD. Then go to the file browser, the file explorer here, click on it, click on the version that we're running based off our architecture. This is a 64-bit, so we're going to be running 64-bit. Next, next, install, wait. This is going to run, and it's going to say, hey, we need to reboot the machine. That's totally fine with us. I'll do anything to get rid of this gross border. Okay, right now it doesn't look like it's changed, but that's okay. It's going to change here in just a second. Boom, Control-Alt-Delete, and we're going to enter that password again. And now with everything loaded, we should be able to do a little magic trick here. Let's see if I'm lying or not. Looks like I am. That should have already expanded. Let's see if we can go to adjust window size. There we go. Okay. Now we have the full screen. So from here, what we need to do is we need to check our network adapters, and we need to determine which one is which. So the first thing that I'm going to do is come over here and open up the adapters. So I just right click this, open network and internet settings. Once this window comes up, change adapter options, and here we see the two NICs, right? So how are we going to determine which one is which? Well, we could right click it, go to status, properties. Oh, I'm sorry, I lied. Details. And we can see here which one is which. So based off of this IP4 configuration, this is getting an API-PA address. So this is saying, hey, I don't have any network access. I can't connect to the world. I'm in a screaming echo chamber. Help me, right? So we know that this one's the internal one. So we're going to go to properties, IP4, use the following, and we're going to say that this IP address is, let me turn on my numbers lock here, 172.16.01, and we're going to give it a 24-bit mask rather than the default 16. We're going to leave the gateway empty, and in the preferred DNS server, we're going to go to 127.0.0.1, which is saying, hey, that's me. There's a loopback address. It's saying, hey, that's me. You come to me for DNS. I'll give you DNS. Okay. Okay. Close. And we're going to rename this to internal so that we know the difference. And this one here we can check the status of as well, make sure that this is correct. So we see the IP4 address here. We know that this is the external. You can see here that this is Comcast. So we're just going to say, okay. We're going to name it something external DHCP. Okay. That way I can see the difference between the two. Okay, so now we have these defined and we have the internal scope figured out for this machine. And the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to install and configure Active Directory domain services. So we're going to go into the server manager here. We're going to go to add roles and features. Next, saying, hey, which domain or which computer do you want to put this on? This is the only one that we have here. It's ours, so we're going to select that one and hit next. And we're going to select Active Directory domain services right there. That's the one. Add feature, next, install. And we're going to wait a little bit for this to fully finish. This has to run and then we have to promote it, which we'll see here in a second. It's already initially starting here. You know what I completely forgot to do is give this device a better name. So let's go ahead and do that first before I promote it. So we're going to go over here and go right click. I just right click this Windows icon and go to System. And this is the default name. I'm not going to remember this and really no one should. This is just a random generated name. So we're going to go to rename PC and we're going to just name this DC01. Why not? Next, and it's going to ask to reboot. Restart now. And we're back up, so we're going to go ahead and open this again. Wait for server manager to come back up. And then we're going to promote the machine. So Active Directory domain services is here, and then you see up here it throws this little flag, right? It says, hey, we installed it, but we need to promote this to the domain controller, and we have to do some configuration. So we're going to select that here. Now in this wizard, we're going to go ahead and add a new forest, right? We're not going to add this to an existing forest because we don't have that yet. So we're just going to go ahead and add a new one. And for the sake of ease, I'm just going to name this something simple, mydomain.com. This would be like, in the corporate environment, it would be like, you know, abc.local, something like that, you know. So go next here. This section we are not going to use, but it's mandatory for us to set this up. So I'm just going to set up something very simple. Password 123. Next. Oh. Not enough complexity. Okay. Back to the drawing board, I guess. So this here, we're just going to go ahead and uncheck this for now and hit next. This NetBIOS name is already going to get filled out by the previous thing that we just filled out, so it's going to be like my domain. It's going to get filled out here. It's just taking a little bit of time to read what was previously put in over here. There we go. Now we have the NetBIOS name. We're going to hit next. Next, next. Now we're back up, so the next thing that we're going to do here is go to Windows Admin Tools, Active Directory Users and Computers, and we're going to see our domain listed right here. We're going to expand that and we see all the OUs inside of it. Here what we're going to do is we're going to create a new organizational unit, which you could think of as basically just like a folder for all the items that you put inside of it, right? And we're going to uncheck this protect container from accidental deletion because this is a lab environment and you know, this is not something that needs to be taken super seriously. I'm going to go ahead and name this admins in all caps so that I can read it easier, and hit OK. Okay, so now we have that. What are we going to put in here? Can anyone take a guess? You guessed it. We're going to create an admin account. So we're going to go ahead and right click on this and go to new user. We do not want to use the default admin account that comes with Windows, right? Now, in an enterprise environment, you do not want to use that at all. That's a big security risk. So we're just going to go ahead and make another admin account here so that we have accountability. So here we're going to do something like make it somewhat a conventional naming structure here. Here's my first name. Here's my last name. And in the username field, we could either put like admin and then first initial, last name, or we could just do something like A standing for admin and then first initial, last name. So we're going to do that. Huh, look at that, A King. That's funny. Okay, so we're going to hit next, and we're going to make the password here. And we're going to uncheck this change password at next logon. And we're going to just set this to password never expires because I don't want to deal with that right now. So we're going to do that, finish. And even though this user is in this admin OU, that does not make them an admin. So we're going to go ahead and right click this, go to properties, member of, see it's in the domain users. We're going to add domain admin, domain admin as a role. And you know what? Let me show you something. Let me delete this. Add domain admin. Now you can click this check names here and you see it auto-corrected to the correct thing, right? Now I just hit enter and it went through because I entered the correct thing and I know that it did. I know that I did, but for all intents and purposes, that's what you would do, right? You would click check names and make sure that this exists and click OK. Apply. Okay. And now this account is the domain admin. Now for the sake of accountability, yet again, we're going to sign out and then send Control-Alt-Delete. And instead of signing in with this admin account, we're going to click Other User, and you see here it's signing into my domain. If I wanted to sign into the local, I would go, what is it, DC /, yeah, and then it signs into local. But we are signing into this domain, so we're going to go with A King and my password. And look at that, boom, there I am. Coming in hot. Okay, everything's up now. Now the next thing that we need to do is we need to put network address translation on this machine so that everyone that's getting DHCP on the internal network also has network address translation so that they're not coming from a bunch of different IP addresses. It's coming from one, set of, one IP address out to the internet. So we're going to go ahead and add role, next, this domain, next, and we're going to find remote access. That's what's listed under. You can see here on the side when it's selected, it talks about VPN, web app proxies, RAS, and NAT right here. That's what we're looking for. So we're going to install that. We don't need any dependencies or features. Next, and then we do need routing, which also includes the direct access and VPN. And we're going to go next, install. We're going to wait a little bit for that to install. This feature installation is done, and now we're going to go over to tools, and we're going to find, where is it, remote access management, should be routing and remote access, there it is. All right, and then we're going to find DC01 here, We're going to go configure and enable routing and remote access. Next, and turn on network address translation. Sometimes we need to reboot. In this instance, I'm going to hope that if I just exit out of this and come back over here, that it will be there. We'll see. So let's close this, go to Tools, and back to Routing and Remote Access, right-click, Configure, Next, Network Address Translation. What we need to do is add the DHCP role. So that's the next thing that we're going to add here. We're going to go to Add Roles and Features again, Next, 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 find DHCP server, there it is, right there, and add that feature, Next, 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 Install. We're going to wait for this to complete. All right, so this installation is finished. We're going to go ahead and close this, and then we're going to open up the DHCP service here, Windows Administrative Tools, DHCP. And here we see DHCP, and we see the domain controller with IPv4 and 6. We're going to go ahead and configure the NIC. Sorry, we're going to go ahead and configure the scope. So we're going to go ahead and go to Actions, New Scope, Next. And I like to name these things a little bit, on the nose so that I know what I'm looking at immediately. So I'm going to go 172.16.1 through 200 network. All right. Go next. And then here it says, hey, where do you want this to start? I want to start at 172.16. Wait, did I say 1 on the last one? Yes, I did. That was a mistake. 172.16.0, 100 to 200. So 172.16.0, 100, and end at 172.16.0, 200. And we're going to make this a /24. So 255.255.255.0, meaning that the IP addresses here in this last octet are the only ones able to be assigned. I'm going to go next, and here it's going to ask for any exclusions. We're not adding exclusions. What you would typically do, though, is if you have something that's statically configured with an IP address, say on your firewall or gateway or anything, let's say you have like a printer or UPS server or anything like that that has a static IP address that's inside of this scope that you're setting, you're going to create the exclusion for that IP address. That way, if that thing is offline, or let's say it is online, and for whatever reason something comes up and it cannot get that address. So in this instance, we're not going to be using that. We're just going to click next. And here in lease durations, 8 days is totally fine. This says, hey, how long is the device going to retain its IP address for? If you were running like a coffee shop or something like that with a DHCP scope on it, and you wanted the devices to pick up a new IP address every like 2 hours so that things don't get clogged up, like your network doesn't get clogged up with IP addresses, you would go ahead and set that here. In our instance, 8 days is totally fine. We're going to hit next, and yes, we do want to configure this now. This is asking for the router gateway. We set this earlier, if you remember, so we're just going to go ahead and enter that number here, 172.16.01, add, next. And then here it says, hey, this is the parent domain for this DNS server. This is accurate. In this IP address section, we're going to set 172.16.01. We're going to remove this if this shows up for you. Go ahead and remove that. Oh, I should have added that first. 172.16.01. Add. Okay. And we're not going to be setting up a Win server, so we can just go ahead and skip this. Yes, I want to activate the scope now, and we're going to finish. So here we can see the scope outlined here with the name, and then the address pool, leases, reservations in case we wanted to, reserve the IP address. And here I think we're going to have to go ahead and enact this. Let me see if I remember where to do that. So I'm going to click. Yep. All right, so you're going to right click the server and then click authorize, and that's going to enact that. Still shows as red. What's going on? All right, so I did something wrong with that last setup, and I know that I did because it showed marked as down, so I'm just going to restart over again. I'm going to go here and go to IPv4, new scope, and then we're going to add 172.16.0.100 through 200 network. And we're going to start at 172.16.0.100 and end it at 172.16.0.200. And we're going to give this a 24-bit mask. Next, we're not going to do exclusions. 8 days is fine. Yes, configure it now. And 172.16.0.1 as the router. Add. And then mydomain.com, server name DC01, and 172.16.0.1, the IP address. It's validating. And we're going to delete that. Oops. Did I delete that? Yeah, I deleted it. Okay, and then hit next. And we're not setting that up. Next, yes, activate the scope, finish. And now we're green. I don't recall what I did incorrectly, but either way, we got it fixed now. So now we have, if I close this out, we have Active Directory Domain Services, DHCP DNS, and network address translation, seen here, all pushed onto this server here. The next thing that we're going to do is get a ton of users registered in Active Directory, right? So I actually have a script that I'm going to grab off of my computer. I'm going to put it on to this one. I'm just going to move this whole folder over here to the desktop. Okay, so now that I've put the PowerShell script and appropriate text files over here, we're going to run the script and get everybody set up and ready to go. That way all these users can access the domain as needed. So what we're going to do here is we're going to open this up. We're going to go to these names here, and I'm just going to add my name. This is all just randomly generated names, by the way. And I'm just going to add my name up to the top here. You know what? Let's actually use a different name because I already created my, you know what? It's fine. Kyle Ingressano, and we're going to add that up to the top here, and we're going to save this, okay? Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up the PowerShell ISE as admin, and we're going to open the file here on the desktop. Let's create users, and here we can see the file. Okay, I'll go over this here in a second, but I want you to notice something. I'm going to go ahead and try to execute this script. So I'm going to browse to where the script exists, cdc users. There we go, that's my user. And then I'm going to check the directory, and then I'm going to cd to desktop. Check the directory again, and cd to AD PowerShell master. Check the directory, and here we see we have the one create users PS1. Now if I tried to run this, oh, it runs. Okay, so sometimes what's going to happen when you try to run a script is it'll say, hey, you cannot run this script because the execution policy will not allow you to run it, right? At that point, you can check online. You can see there's a bunch of different flags for being able to bypass this. The execution policy would run something like this here. You would run like set execution policy, if I can spell this correctly, set execution policy bypass or unrestricted, something like that, and then you would change it back after the script is done running. And if we check Active Directory users and computers now, and we go here, we can see that the users OU has been created, whereas previously it was not here, and there's a bunch of users, right? How many exactly? Well, let's find out. So if I right-click this domain and I click Find and I leave this empty and I just hit Find Now, you can see it's populated 1,052 items. Now if I type in Kyle, there's me, right? There's the account that was created and the domain admin account that we created earlier. So we have a ton of these users already created in the domain environment. They're all set up, they got passwords, they're ready to go. So now that all this is done, what's our next step? Well, the next step from here would be to create a Windows machine and join it to the domain and make sure it's fully functional. So let's do that. Now you would just come over here, click New, name it whatever you want, Windows 10 machine, right? Look for the ISO, attribute the resources as seen fit. I already have this. This has not been booted up yet, but I'm going to go ahead and before I boot this up, I'm going to go over to Settings and go to Advanced, make sure bidirectional is on, and then go to, where's network, and boom, there's internal. And I set this up to be this way so that I could just go ahead and power up the machine. Save myself a little bit of time. So I'm going to start this up here. This opened on the other monitor. Let me just drag this over. Okay, and we're going to Control-Alt-Delete. We'll check that later. Okay, so now this device is up. You see it says it's registered to mydomain.com. If I go ahead and open up command prompt, I can run ipconfig and see, boom, it is attached to mydomain.com. It has the gateway of 172.16.01, which is what we set up earlier. That's the internal NIC with the subnet mask of /24, and its IP address is 172.16.0.100. Got the first one in the scope, right? Let's try to ping Oh, I gotta turn on numbers lock. Ping 172.16.0.1, and we're getting a response. Now, do we have name resolution? Ping mydomain.com. And we do have a response. How far does this go? Ping 8.8.8.8. Hey, there we go. There's Google's DNS server. How about pinging google.com? And we can do that too. Look at that. We got access to the network and we got access to the internet. Look at us. So this is done now, right? And actually, if we come back over here to the Active Directory domain environment and we open up DHCP, we should see in the lease, where's DHCP? Right there. We should see this device. So if I open this up, expand IPv4 in address leases, boom, there we go. There's the desktop, right? And we know that for a fact because I can open up this virtual machine and there it is. So this device is getting an address within this DHCP scope, and here I can see the lease, I can see its duration, and I can see its unique ID. What else can I see from the domain controller? Well, if I head over to Active Directory, users and computers, which honestly I should just pin down here so it makes it easier for me. I should pin this too. And I come over to the computers OU. Oh, that's right, because while it's part of the domain, it needs to be registered as a domain device. So let's come back over here and do that. So right here, if I go to, this is just another way of going to the rename PC section, right? You can go to about, and then here you can check and see the device name. So what you don't want to do from here when you're domain joining a device is you do not want to click rename this PC. You want to scroll down, you want to go to rename this PC advanced, and you want to click change. From here you can change to member of domain, mydomain.com, and we can name this something like client 1. Okay, now I'm going to hit OK. It's going to ask for authorization. Okay, so here it's asking for authorization. It says, hey, give me the credentials of a domain admin to prove that you actually can join. So again, for accountability purposes, I want to enter an address that's not just the regular administrator. And we were able to do that because we set that account to be a domain admin earlier and Active Directory users and computers. So hey, this needs to reboot. Cool, fine with me. We're actually going to reboot this in a second. We're going to do one other thing here. We're going to go to Devices, Insert Guest Edition, and we're going to do both of these at the same time. And we're going to reboot now. All right, the machine's back up. I'm going to go ahead and send Control-Alt-Delete. And here, instead of signing in with the local user account that I created earlier, I'm just going to go ahead and sign into my domain with any account. You know, I was going to sign in with my domain admin account, but let's not do that. Let's sign in with an actual user account. Let's say, whose name do I like? Let's go with this one. Okay. We're going to sign in with AGUO and password 1. So now this device is being registered to this user and is going through the setup process. Now, the setup process could take longer time if we have specific like GPOs, like group policies, or anything that needs to get pushed to the device or to the user's account for the device. But we did not do that in this setup. We just are doing a bare bones Active Directory, DHCP, DNS, NAT setup to prove that the computers are functional and the users can get started and ready to work in this environment. Cool. So now I'm signed in as that domain user that we just created in the script. We can see here it says C users and then their name. If I wanted to run this for whatever reason, you can see here it's my domain with that user that was just created. Now if I go back over here to the AD server and I go to AD users and computers, click on computers, there's still nothing there. Okay, let me refresh this. Refresh computers. There we go. There's client 1. There's the device. DNS name is client1.mydomain.com. Right? We can, you know, add this to particular groups. We can specify the location, its management status. We can see its operating system version. And if we come back over here, we can see that this user is fully functional and ready to go. We're just going to open up Edge here and we're going to get started the way everyone else that I personally know that's the most productive get started on their typical day-to-day, and that is by going to youtube.com. So here we are, guys. That's the lab for today. I might be expanding on this environment in the next few videos. See you next time, guys. Peace.